So, a couple of things just really quick about Proofpoint. If some of you that don't know who we are, where we've been, 20 years in the business. We've got a terrific staff here in the Toronto area. We've got over 220 employees here in the Toronto area, from development, product management, engineering folks, sales, marketing. So I heard the talk about if you're looking for something, you're wanting to network, we're a pretty good company, and we've got a nice presence here. So certainly looking to expand. We continue to expand. Really a couple of things that I just want to highlight. We've seen in the migration to the cloud, the importance of a people-centric strategy that I'm going to talk about. We've made a number of acquisitions. I was one of those in August of 2016. Our most recent is highlighted there with a company called Observit, because we've seen organizations very concerned with not just losing direct dollars on a fake invoice, but also intellectual property. And so having a data loss prevention and understanding, is somebody trying to do something malicious? Are they trying to pull that off with a USB file or leave and forward that to a Gmail address? Being able to protect your information as you have these cloud strategies. And I'll talk a bit more about that. The other thing that we're really proud of is the work that we do alongside our partners. We believe in a better together strategy. So we work with organizations like this on the right side to make network security a richer, fuller data set. We may detect it first, they may detect it first, but via APIs and that sense of community, we're able to help our customers. So what I thought I'd do is go through a progression here that takes from a threat landscape discussion down into people-centric strategy, and then very specifically around email authentication. So you heard from Rodney earlier about how bad actors are doing impersonation and identity deception. So that's eventually where I'm going to get down into. That's a group that I'm affiliated with at Proofpoint. So from an attack perspective, we've seen starting late 2018 across 2019, the bad actors are definitely focused on the people. They're not looking to exploit vulnerabilities, and there are a host of different ones. So when Rodney was talking about how you look at people on the staff, you've got to have people alongside the machine learning, that you've also got to have folks that know how to look at the footprint, the signature, what's happening. Threat researchers are critical to have. So that's how we get these names. And we see that these are all about the bad actors as a signature that they create. In 2019, we saw on the top attacks, it dropped to just a single vulnerability as a top threat. So multiple actors, different approaches, credential phishing, malware, the spam, all different types, but really going after the person and trying to get them to engage in some way, often without a malicious attachment or a URL. They're just using LinkedIn, an extremely powerful tool in their arsenal, to understand what people are doing. We had a customer, as a side story here, who's very proud of the patents that he created, linked to, in this manufacturing instance, to the first electric car that this manufacturer was going to put out, and how he's a lead engineer with that technology. The bad actors knew exactly what to go after. Now they wanted intellectual property and to try to get this person to engage with them. So that, being a very attacked person, was a frontline engineer, not the CEO. And so looking at how the bad actors are going after individuals is critical to that people-centric approach. These multiple threat types, like I mentioned before, they had those names, the TA dash. They're doing different things to try to get through, to try to get past the perimeter, past the machine learning, everything that we do, multiple vendors, and the way that they try to shore things up and protect our assets here. So what we'll do is we'll dive into 3 key topics here that we see our customers worried about, that we talked at length about at RSA as part of our people-centric strategy, and then dive deeply into more of the business email compromise piece. So BEC, or business email compromise, has been a headline for several years. They started tracking this in 2014, and the FBI has gotten to the point where they've upped the threshold of loss, because there have been so many cases. They're now not taking something if it's under $250,000. It jumped from last year. That number, the 26 billion, was only 12.5 billion through 18. It's now moved up double in size because the bad actors know they can get through. It's easy to get through to create a highly targeted, low volume, again, typically no payload going at the organization. And they'll do it via direct domain impersonation. So at rbc.com, which RBC is doing a great job of locking down their domain. We'll talk about that. They're also doing a display name impersonation. Those are very hard to stop. They're using a webmail address or they create. So BEC is also made up of the second component called email account compromise. This is when the baddies really have fun. So once they've gotten through, which we're going to go through a couple stats on the success of these, they then move lateral. They're sitting back looking at calendars. They wait. They're extremely patient. They want to know what's happening in the organization, how your executives are engaging with other companies, what their calendars look like, or they're just understanding with a payroll person how they're invoicing, exchanging payments back and forth with supply chain partners. So once they've got that compromised account, it is truly game on moving data out of the organization or just data back and forth between employees because it truly appears it's coming from a trusted source. It's very difficult to detect, is this bad? What's happening? The next thing that we see from a threat perspective is with this migration into the cloud applications over the last year, and all these stats are out of 2019, that the organizations, 85% have seen an actual breach, that something has occurred, that they've had a credential taken from them. They've had half of them have had a compromised account. Up to the CEO, C-level desk, it's in the 6% range. So what we're also seeing is that VIP is no longer the one being attacked. I'd mentioned kind of a lower level in the organization. We're seeing it as payroll specialists, lower levels within the organization that are the very attacked people versus the most important. As anecdotal story here, Proofpoint, one of our most attacked people was actually an SE out in Vancouver. Of all of our employees, not our CEO or CFO, last year across a 3-month period, William had been in charge of developing a newsletter that went out to our customers, was creative guy. He's out on LinkedIn, et cetera. Bad actors wanted to get a hold of him thinking, man, if I could get an SE and crack through into Proofpoint, wouldn't that be awesomeness? So they're going after the profiles. So from an exploitation perspective, organizations obviously do the things around multi-factor authentication, doing the work that you need to do to try to protect the perimeter. But what we want to do is educate our customers on the way that they're being impersonated or the way that they're being attacked. And so what we're able to do is actually drill down into the organization to show a person that they're being hit with credential phish or whatever that may be, so that then they can be educated on that. So it's a component of education at the core. So you've got to enable your employees to understand what it is that's happening around them, how they're being targeted, but then circling that with technology. Another piece that we see here that's critical to understand is as organizations move into cloud applications and engaging in the cloud, that migration has caused, with a compromise, the bad actors to then grab account credentials, log in Toronto. A few hours later, you see something logging in Singapore, elsewhere, moving lots of files, trying to get those out of your environment. Our folks at Emotet up top there continue this beautiful infection chain that comes in with a document. You see this all the time of they've gotten better and better at this. They're going to put in a password, then they send in the email, the password, so that you know how to unlock the document. Well, that's a pretty obvious tip that this is going to get bad really quick. A lot of them also detonate it late. They don't want you to be detected whenever you're coming through the email gateway, or those that are trying to detect it on a firewall rule. So they actually detonate the URL 2 weeks later. then that wreaks havoc for the organization that have these, as they're called, red teams. I was just talking about somebody earlier, it's on a red team. How do you go figure out who got that? How do you figure out who's infected? What happened in that chain? So you want to be able to quickly pull those from inboxes and say, uh-oh, we had something go late. We need to pull that back in. So the migration into the different cloud applications is also coming from a trusted source, that they're seeing this come from these applications that if they can publish in there a one-time URL, go out of what appears to be a trusted source, a supply chain partner is going to honor that. So again, an account's been compromised. They're moving things through what appear to be a trusted environment, going undetected, falling into your business partner's hands. So we talked a lot about the people-centric piece. One of the things that we've seen in Verizon Data Breach Report updates this year after year, I think this was 92% last year, keeps going up, where obviously email's the easiest, it's the cheapest, it's convenient to get in and bust through. You can have really cheap tools to get in there, but yet the most spend is in other areas. You know, I think it was Microsoft published that you guys had reduced the threat vector on the perimeter by 2/3 last year, which was huge, right? That's patching, all that is working. Those tools are effective. So now what are we doing around that email security and protecting the people, educating those folks to know what to look for on those highly targeted emails? So you've got to take really, versus the defense view, think of it from an attack view. And you can't look at it the old way of containing the perimeter and looking at that outside the normal firewall rules, et cetera. And so where you move to is really how the attackers are looking at you. Just like I talked about with LinkedIn's a great tool, as well as other social sites. So when we take a look at the very attacked people, we also have this view of how do we not only identify how they're being targeted, but with an education, how do we get to them in that time versus the once a year, everybody takes their training, they ask their 15-year-old, actually they bribe their 15-year-old, here's $20. I've got a really fun program that's going to take you about 45 minutes to work through, and then you go through security awareness training. That's not going to be a very effective way. What if you could show them with vignettes as issues occur so that we can educate those in the organization how they're being targeted, those with the most privileged data, how they're being targeted so that we can protect them. So getting into specifically now drilling into email authentication and looking at the threats, how they're targeting your domains. If you're a company out here looking at how is somebody impersonating me, how is this domain identity being impersonated, it's been around forever, right? We've seen the impersonation since the beginning of time. There was actually, I don't know if anybody saw it, there's a great Snapple commercial where they're back there, the telegraph is going, and it's the guy's reading it through, and he goes, "Oh, this is huge. We're going to be rich. We're going to be rich." And he goes, "Is it a cure for malaria?" And he goes, "No, we've just been wired. If we wire $10,000, we're going to get $1 million." Anyway, they go crazy. It's been around forever, not to pick on the Nigerians or anything, but been around forever, and they've unfortunately been the butt of the joke for a while. But BEC, or business email compromise, has gone after those for identity deception. We've seen governments jump into the fray to say, we've got to stop this. How do we mitigate this risk? In particular, RBC stepped up last year, and they issued something very similar to what the US government put as a mandate to all of their agencies at the end of 2017 to be complied with in October of 18. And that was a binding directive for Start TLS, for deploying DMARC and locking down the domains and going through this authentication journey. ISACs are pushing this, the healthcare ISAC in the United States. HIMSS, for those of you in healthcare, HIMSS talks a lot about this to their members, and financial services ISAC, et cetera. So as the numbers go up, governments look to try to rein in the horses that have all run out of the barn and take care of things. So why are they successful? Well, they leverage multiple tactics that oftentimes aren't detected by a single solution, product, machine learning, et cetera. You have to have a combination. You have to implement the tools around email authentication like DMARC to protect your domains. You have to go beyond that to have the detail, the analysis from the business gateway world to understand your B2B activity, and then how you're engaged with consumers. And we see this a lot, that oftentimes campaigns or emails and correspondence is going out in the consumer world from third-party senders that are not picked up on the business side of the house or in the business gateway world. So you've got to be able to identify who's acting as you, how you're engaging with your customers, and then identify if somebody's registering lookalike domains, how they're sending out these fake emails that have a display name impersonation with a webmail address, so that you can at least warn the customers, create block lists, etc. So the problem, we see it as hitting multiple targets. The bad actors are not just going after employees for that account compromise, but it's targeting consumers, it's going after employees, it's going after your supply chain partners. And the way that they're approaching this is multifaceted, from different tactics to get to an end game, and that is an account compromise. That's where they're happiest. That's where they can move lateral and extract the important intellectual property or get you to engage with a supply chain partner on their behalf. Knowing who's sending on your behalf is critical. As I've mentioned before about third-party senders, if you can authenticate your supply chain partners as well as your senders, you're on your way to locking down your domain portfolio and preventing business email compromise coming inbound, acting as you, as well as acting as you into your supply chain and the consumer world. So I don't want to spend much time on this because I don't want to plug on the Proofpoint side, but we offer through this managed service, being able to help our customers through a process with their third-party senders to do this email authentication, to protect their domains, to improve deliverability. Oftentimes marketing gets involved in this because they want to improve that deliverability out into the marketplace. Security ops is involved. They want to raise awareness on the website if they do see bad actors doing a brand impersonation. And then of course the mail team is involved to ensure that we're mitigating that business email compromise.